Oh, I know Harold and Johnny were on. I don't know, they left. So I'll text them.
I was using the Zoom on my phone the last few nights, and for some reason now it couldn't work. So I had to run and get my computer. That's the only that was. Here's Harold. Okay.
Okay. Yes, Harold.
Yeah.
What's the time there? It's not 6 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock.
6 p.m.
Is
Shabbos, we're starting Shabbos at 7:30.
Okay.
So it's actually Shabbos starts at 8:30. Candlelighting is 8:31, but we're starting Shabbos earlier at 7:30.
Except for Shabbos.
Say it again.
There was a shir last night on Tosefet Shabbos.
On Tosefet, right.
Right. Okay, where's Johnny? Just let me call Johnny.
Okay. Yeah. No problem.
Hi, Walter.
Yeah, he's back. Ernie's on. He's on.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. How was your day today?
Very nice. It was cool. We're in a town by the lake called Ionina, the Ionian Sea. But there's a lake here, and there's a beautiful resort hotel, and we were on an island in the middle of the lake. So it's cooler. It was like 85 degrees there. When you come here, it's like 91. So but it's not 100 anymore. You know, that was 2 weeks ago. So it's very, and we have these fans that we walk around with misting ourselves if it's hot, but it's not that much of a problem. But it's very sad how the Jews were rounded up here. You know, a few days after D-Day, you know, it's very sad. So there was a beautiful old shul from hundreds of years ago, and we visited there. So it's very nice what we're seeing so far. Okay, we're on Ayin Ches.
Okay.
Ayin Ches, Omar Aleph, 78. The Mishnah said, Afilu hu ima b'mita, and they're in his house. So when he gives her the get, he really hasn't given it into her rishus. So that's why it said it's Eino Megureshes. Amar Rav Lo Shanu b'mita shelo. That's his bed. Aval b'mita shelo Megureshes. But even though, if let's say the bed is designated her bed, even though it's in his house, Rashi says it's Megureshes. It's machlokes in Baba Basra that if somebody has something, you know, in somebody else's rishus, so this is holding like the pshat that says that the woman can retain ownership of her own bed in his own house. If they're in his bed, Eino Megureshes, b'mita shelo Megureshes. So here's where the Gemara asks the question: b'mita shelo Megureshes. There's a principle, kelev shalokeach. Birshus Molcheru. For example, I go into somebody's store and I buy something. Until I take it into my own rishus, it's really not mine yet. It's still the rishus of the seller. So, because even though the bed might be her personal bed, but the bed is physically located in his rishus. Are we learning from this case then that if I'm in a make company and I buy something and I take possession of it, even though I'm in the rishus of make company, I've already acquired it? It's really a machlokes whether that works. That if it comes into my possession when I'm still in the rishus of the moich, I didn't acquire it. Are we learning from this Mishnah an answer to that machlokas? Gemara says no. Lo tzricha. We're talking about a case shegvoa asar. The bed that we're talking about here, that belonged to the wife, is 10 tefachim high, so it's considered its own rishus, separate from the rishus of the baal. The legs of the bed are in the rishus of the Baal. So a mokum kari lokapti inshi. That mokum of the legs of the bed, it's a small place. There's not a big peda regarding whose rishus it is, so it's considered the rishus of the wife. Then the Mishnah said, if you put it, you gave it to her, so she's holding it in her chest, or she has a bag or a basket, even though she is in the rishus of her husband, or the chotzer, we say megureshes. Or it says amai. It's another example of kelev shlokech b'shus moicherhu. We said it before. It's a machlokes. Amar Yidam Shmuel. You're going to try to call it tluyabo. It was hanging on the woman's body, like maybe it had a strap, and it was hanging on her shoulder. So then it's clearly in the rishus of the wife, not in the rishus of the baal. Rish Lakish Amar, Kshura Afal Pishen Tluya. If it was tied to her, even if it was not suspended, that's also enough. Ravada Barava Amar, it's hanging between her thighs, and then it's considered where she sits. So he's not makpid where that's in his rishus. Rav Mishashi Rav Dimi Amar So let's say the husband is a seller of baskets, so he's not makpid on that makom because the whole chotzer is made for that. Rav Yechon Omar, you don't need that explanation. Makom cheka knuyelo. Her chest is her own thing. Makom calls it knuyelo. It's kanu for her. Amar of my time to Rav Yechon. If you say not a makpid for a husband regarding his wife, he's not makpid lo makom cheka lo makom koso. Any place personally on the woman's body or on in her basket, that he gives the right for the woman to use that for whatever purposes she needs, even though it's in his rishus. Tanan hachi zarkula l'sochek kalsa or l'soch kol davar shehu kalsa if it's similar to a basket or a megureshas. Now, what is that coming to include? Kol davar shehu kalsa l'sui mai l'sui tasket achla bastamri. For example, a basket that holds dates that she's eating from it. So on that place as well, he's not makpid. Mishnah. Amar lo kinsi shtar chayvzeh. He doesn't call it a get, but he gives something. He gives a document to his wife, and he says, "Take this document." Or she takes it from, let's say, he's got a document on the back of his back, and then she reads it. Koira, Barehu Gita, Eino Get. So if somehow it ended up in her possession and she wasn't told, oh, here's your get, it's not a get. He has to say, this is your get. Nasan biyada. Vihi yeshena. Let's say he puts it in her hand while she's sleeping. V'niyara, then she wakes up. The koira, and she reads it and she sees it's a get. Varehu gita ain't a get. Achiyar malacha gitech. You have to specifically say here, I'm giving you a get. So kiyar malacha gitech mahavi. In the case where she took it from behind him, and he then says, oh, here's your get. Why should that work? This is going to be similar to a case where the get is lying on the ground, and he says to her, go pick up the get from the ground. it's not considered she's a megureshes unless he has to actually give it to her. Ema sheshlafto me'achrov. So this wasn't the case. This was the case which was, it was, let's say, in his belt, and he took it out, she took it out. It was a document stuffed in his pants, then he took it out. So, that's the same problem. She's taking it from him. He's not giving it to her. So how can you, why is there a havami that's a get? That means he bent over and made it easy for her to reach it. So by bending, that's an action of the giving of a get on his side, and that's enough. Take this document. Or he bent over. Rebbe says if he bent over and she took it and he told her it's a get, it's okay. Rav Shimon says it's not a get. The husband has to take it back from her, and then give it back to her. To fulfill nasna biyado, to fulfill that it was a proper giving. Similarly, the Mishnah said, nasna biyado v'hi yeshena. She was sleeping. He put it in his hand, in her hand. V'kor v'harei gita eno get. Achim lahagitech to Rebbe. So according to Rebbe, even though it ended up in her hand, not in an appropriate way, as long as it's in her hand and he says, here's your get, it works. Rav Shimon ben Elazar doesn't agree. Rav Shimon says he has to take it back from her. I need the machlokas in both cases. The E is Marbach Kamaisa. If I would have told in the first case, by Yikom Rabbi Mishum, Shabbos Agrushahi, as long as she's awake and conscious, and she knows what's going on, even though she doesn't know that it's a get yet. But as long as eventually she knows that it's a get, it works. But by giving it to her when she's sleeping, the love bas igrushi, she doesn't have any das then. It's like a shoita or cotton. Maybe maybe Rebbe will agree with Rav Shimon ben Elazar. He has to take it back from her physically and give it to her. So itmer b'ha. So we have to show that Rebbe argues in that case as well. V'itmer b'ha. B'hakom Rav Shimon ben Elazar that he has to give her the get. But maybe the other case he would agree with Rebbe. I needed the machlokas in both cases. Amar Rava. Kosav lo get. The nosno biyad avda. The woman has a servant, and he puts the get into the hands of a servant who's sleeping. But even while he's sleeping, mishmarto, it was bad timing. Parrot said, oh yeah.
Where are we?
Ayin ches amud aleph. Not all the way to the bottom yet. We're talking about giving a get when the woman is sleeping. So she's not, we say you put it in your hand. So once she wakes up and you tell her it's a get, so according to Rebbe, it is a good get. According to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, you have to take it back from her and give it to her again. Now, Amar Rava Kosav Laget v'nosto biyad avda. You give it to you put it in the hand of the woman's evet, servant, who was sleeping, Yashon, but Mishamto, but he would sort of be watching it in a sense. I raise a get. And evet is considered like karka that belongs to the owners. And if he was awake also, if the evet was awake near Eno get, the evet is not koined to the woman. It's still koined to the man. And he's watching himself. So in either way, it doesn't fulfill the criteria. Yoshon Mishamarto, if he's sleeping but is able to protect the getter, is a get. So the Gemara wants to know, my chotzer malechasi, it's a moving chotzer. The chotzer malechas loikana. A moving chotzer cannot acquire something for somebody. And maybe Yoshon shiny, maybe if he's sleeping, it's considered as if it's immovable. But V'amar she'ilu hayim ma'alech loikana, Yoshev loikana as well. There's a principle that if when it was awake, it cannot be koine because it's a moving chotzer. So even when it's sleeping, it can't be koine. The hilchasa, we say, the only time it would be a get is Eved Kofus. If you chained up the Eved so he couldn't move, so then it would be a get. It's like giving it into her hands. Haiso meres b'shus harabi. The woman is in Rishus harabi. And the husband throws a get, v'zar kolon. Karav lot migureshes. So if it's close to her, we will define that. She's migureshes. Karav lo, ain't no migureshes. If the get that he threw is closer to him than to her, then he really didn't give her anything. What about mechza? What if it's exactly equidistant between him and her? It's a case of migureshes ve'eno migureshes, which we've learned before. It's not a full get. It's enough of a get that you would not do ibum, but you need chlitza. V'chein le'inyan kiddushin. We know a woman is miskadesh b'kesef shtarobiyah. He throws kesef to her. If it landed closer to her, it's a good kiddushin. If he landed closer to him, it's not a good kiddushin. V'chein le'inyan achov. The same regarding a creditor. Im amar lo bal choyvoi, zrok li choyvi. Somebody lent money to somebody, and the somebody comes to return the loan, and he says, "Throw it to me." V'zarku loan. Parav lamalve. If it landed closer to the lender, zacha malve, then the loan has been paid off. Even if for some reason, before it actually gets into his possession, it gets stolen or gets burnt up, the lender, the borrower, has fulfilled his requirement to pay it back. So if the money that he threw back remained close in physical proximity to the borrower, he remains chayiv. If it's exactly equidistant, they divide the money. Now, hechi dami karav law. Hechi dami karav law. How do you define closer to her, closer to him? Amarav. Arba amay shalom zeu karav law. If it's within 8 feet, arba amay, an amma is 2 feet. Within 2 feet of her, it's karav law. Arba amay shalom zeu karav law. So hechi dami mechza mechza. So how do you define equidistant? They're both within arba amis. So let's see which one of them got into the arba amis closest to the get first. And the one who got there first, it's considered theirs. Maybe you'll tell me. To also Tarvai Badi Adadi, that they reached that place exactly at the same time, we have a principle in halacha. Halacha does not recognize simultaneity. You cannot say that 2 actions happen exactly simultaneously. Impossible. That's why there in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, it says kachatzos halayim. He doesn't say bachatzi alayim. From a Kodesh Baruch Hu's vantage point, it says vayhi bachatzi alayim, because Hashem can determine exactly at that moment. Human beings cannot. I think it has something to do with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that you can't tell velocity and position exactly at the same time. It's uncertain. if you know its velocity, you don't know its position. If you know its position, you don't know its velocity.
I'm reading a book on quantum mechanics, so that's exactly what you're saying. Yes.
Perhaps it's a way 2,000 years ago of the Chazal enunciating that principle, that there's a certain thing that we cannot say with certainty exactly. Here, like you can't say exactly at the same time that these two things happen at the same time. El Amr of Kahana, Hacha Bishmona Amos Mitzum Tzamos Askina. Her Arba Amos and his Arba Amos, and the shared point between them is exactly Mitzum Tzam. The get Yotzim Arba Shalol Arba Shalom. The get is still lying in the ground in his Arba Amos, but reaches her Arba Amos. So that's why it's considered Megureshes Veda Megureshes. But the get is still connected to him, because you just said some of the get is within the Arba Amos of him. So there's not a Nesina Shlema. He hasn't really gotten rid of it completely. So the Gemara rejects that. Elor Rabbi Rav Yosef Tamar Tavayu. So the Gemara is struggling. How do you define that equidistant place? So Rabbi Rav Yosef say, Hacha b'shtei kite edim askina. Two groups of edim. Achas oimeres karav lo. The achas oimeres karav lo. We have two groups of two edim. Two edim say the get was closer to him, and two edim say the get was closer to her. Say it again.
These are Milwaukee.
No, they threw it. It was thrown, and they're not moving. So the one aide said, we saw it, it was closer to her. And the other two edim say, no, we saw it was closer to him. So it's a testimony about the facts. We can't describe a case about the facts themselves because of this problem of simultaneity. But you can have a machlokas between edim. Two edim say it's this, two edim say it's that. You have no hachra. You have no way of determining which one is correct. So it's a shita. They're arguing b'deya, not in the physical location. Rav Yochanan Noimer, that he doesn't agree with the way Rob said that had to do with Arba Amos. Because the Mishnah clearly said Karav law means the whole get is close to her. Afilu Mea Amma has to do with that. Let's say the get is 100 yards away from her, but 500 yards away from him. So it's still closer to her. Has nothing to do with Daled Amos, says Rav Yochanan. The Karav Loshan Afilu Mea Amma. Okay, so based on Rav Yochanan's explanation, that has to do with physical proximity, but it's not totally in Daled Amos. So you're still left with the problem, Hechidami Merza Merza. How do you define the case which is equidistant between them? If he can protect the get and she can't, zero karav lo. That's considered that it's in his possession. He yachol l'shamra, who ain't yachol l'shamra, zero karav lo. But shneim yachol l'shamra, if they both can protect it, or vice versa, shneim ein yacholim, that's zero mechzal mechol. That's considered 50-50. And this was explained to Rav Yochanan in the name of Rav Yonis. Rav Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Yonis lived in Bavel. And he was surprised that the Babylonian scholars were able to explain it the same way like him. Tanya Machi, Rav Eliezer Oimer, Kol Shekar of law Melo, any get that is closer to her than to him. Ubok Kelev and Oklo. But a dog can come and take it away, and it never really reached her hand, ain't a Megureshes. That why ain't megureshes? Kolachi tinter v'tezel. It means if it was already in a location which was core of law, so that's it. The get was chal. We don't need the Isha to watch the get every minute. Even if it was lost afterwards, why wouldn't she be considered a divorced woman? If it's closer to him, if it's closer to her than to him, but a dog could come and take it. The who and the husband Yachol Shomro could keep it away from the dog. The he ain't Yachol Shomro, but the woman would not have been able to protect it. Then ain't megureshes. So you see, it's connected to this ability to watch it. Shmuel Rav Yehuda, Shinana, you have long teeth, which was sort of a knock. That means Karav law means it has to be close enough where if she bends over, she can pick it up. And you are not going to do something to be mater neshus ish and to pater from chlitza. You should be machmir, and you shouldn't say that a woman could go out free without chlitza unless the get actually gets into her hands. And the poskim like that it mamish has to get to her hand for her to be considered completely divorced, like Shmuel.
Doesn't have to. It doesn't have. Don't we paskin that has to be in a Dalit Amos? That anyway, Dalit Amos.
It says like this: Zora get li ishto via get ben shneim. In Karv Yosef law raises suffix meguresh. If it's closer to her, it's a suffix. Even if it's close enough for her to bend down and get it, suffix. Eino megureshes at shiagia get li yoda. Umishiagia li yoda yechol nasiv al chatchila like Shmuel.
Yeah, but isn't her chatzer considered her like her yad? If you put it in her chatzer.
This is talking about Rishus Harabim.
Yeah, but Rishut Harabim, the Chachamim paskin that in Dalet Amos, when you're walking in a Rishus Harabim, that within Dalet Amos, it's actually your Rishus. It's actually that's how the poskim. It's your Rishut at that time. So Dalet Amos.
But I just read the halacha.
I understand, but I'm just telling you, if you that's what Shmuel says. Who passes like that? The Rambam?
The Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam. And the Ramah says, Kol dvarim eilehe mi'ikra din. Aval lechatchila in legarish isha yidei nesina b'rshusa ela kasher noisin b'yodem mamish. We don't use the principle of chatzir. That mi'ikra din it would work. Lechatchila we're going to be machmir.
So Bedi Evet it would work, right?
There also we possibly like Shmuel that if it's just placed close to her and if she can bend down and get it, it's not enough. It's a suffix megureshes. She's not fully megureshes until it reaches her hand. That means, let's say you made it close enough to her so she could bend over and pick it up. She's not a megureshes yet until she actually physically bends
but that's why it's
not enough. Let's say the case was Adim report that it was next to her, that it was close enough that she could bend down and pick it up, but it never reached her hand. According to Shmuel, she's not a megureshes, and it's a suffix. And therefore, she would not be considered a completely non-Eish until she actually reached her hand. And the Ramah can't use any of these things. That's why in Beis Din,
so hold on a second. So what's the chiddush? Why is there's a big chiddush that basically Dalet Amos in the Rishus Harabim is considered your Rishut?
For Kinyonim, that's for Kinyon.
Well, so that's a Kinyon. But so there is an Inyan of that. Yeah. Even if you walk in Rishus Harabim, it's considered your Rishus.
Yes, but forget they went an extra mile. And by the way, the Ramah adds, Yesh lachmir filu b'di'evet, shelo lahatira, not to permit her, ad she'yageh get liyoda mamish.
Okay.
Gablenu be'atzma lo siyu, she has to.
What's the point of the Dalet Amos Rishus Harabim that it's considered your Rishus? It's so just for other things. I guess it only works for men. Doesn't work for
That
women.
has
I
to do
don't
with
understand this.
kinyonim, with like masa umatan, business, not necessarily being matir. Here they were concerned she's an Ashes Ish. We want to make sure that that we dissolve her status in the Ashes Ish in a complete way as possible. Even though you see that.
Yeah, but you want to be mattered the divorce because maybe the man gave especially the divorce because he doesn't want her to have to go to Yibum and something else. So why wouldn't you why would you go to Umrah?
Because it's a question of doubt, because you see the Gemara treated it as suffix migureshes. We don't want sfekis. So I think the point of nafkamina is the case where two Eidim come and saw that the get were mamish at her feet, where she could bend over and pick it up. But they didn't actually see her bend down and pick it up. And they come and relate this to Bezdin. So Bezdin will say that she's a suffix until they give testimony to say she actually bent down and picked it up, and it was in her hand when they'll matter her completely as a non-Ashes. Very interesting discussion. Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi. Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi. There was a case where a get didn't reach her hand, but it was near her. And then it was lost. So it never reached her hand. Like it was there, but then a flood came and washed it away. They still required chlitza. They didn't want to rely on that get that was Korev law. So even from the pashtus of the Gemara, we see like the way the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam paskin that she's not a divorced woman until it actually reaches her hand. Despite, as Walter points out, the din of Daled Amos is a din. And let's see how it works for Chelin in Kiddushin. That when you give Kesef Kiddushin, it works the same way, Karev law, that if it was Mechza, it's only Safek Kiddush. Amr Vasi Amr Rav Yochanan, Legidin Amru V'lo Davarech. So Rav Yochanan says, no, it was only this din was not said by, let's say, a person who borrowed money and threw it back and it got lost. Because a get is given to a woman against her will. So in retrospect, we say it's a get. But in general, we don't say this principle that we're talking about a case a guy owed somebody $1,000 and he threw $1,000 at the guy, at the lender. And the lender never actually picked it up, and then a flood washed it away. Do we say that the borrower fulfilled his debt? We say no. It doesn't work for other things besides get. Since a get, she's divorced against her will, it works there. So on that statement of Rav Yochanan, Eitzvei Ravav Ravasi, it's not so. V'chein Kiddushin. So it does work for other things besides get. So Shiny Hassam, by Kiddushin, there's a pasuk that says, V'yatsa v'haita li'ish acher. The connection in the same pasuk of the word yatsa, which means leave a marriage, and v'haisa li'ish, which means come into a marriage through Kiddushin. So that there's a comparison between Kiddushin and Gerushin. So that's the only reason why Kiddushin works the same way as Gittin. But the other cases, by Balchov doesn't work. So Freik the Gemara Esrei, what do you mean? The Mishnah itself says, V'chein le'inachov, that if the Malvis said to the Loive, Zrok li choivi, he gave permission, the lender gave permission to throw me back the money. The Zarkalon, he threw it, the borrower. And then if it fell, Karav Lamalvis, Zach Loive. If it fell closer to the lender, the borrower's off the hook. However, Karav Lelove, if it remained closer to the borrower, so he's chayiv, Loive is chayiv to pay. Mechzal Mechzaf was half and half. Shneim yachloku. So it is like get v'kiddush. Chochma eskinon. Sha'armele the malve in that case told the Loive Zrok li choiver He added the words, and you'll be potter. So then what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? He did according to the Tanai. Lo tzricha, the chiddush is, he didn't say, he said, throw me the chov, and I want it to work the same way as the Hilchos Gittin. It'll be the same din. So, Vakati Maila Memra. L'chora, what's the chiddush there? Torah's Gittin, we know the Allah. I was joking with you. Doesn't really have any legal strength. Kamash Malon, that if he said that, it would be chal the same. Amrav Chisda. Get biyodo. Umashche. Biyodo. Let's say the get is tied to a string, and he places the get in the woman's hand, but he's holding on to the string that's tied to the get, and he can pull it back to him anytime. Im yochol lenatko, if he can pull it back from her, ulavio etzlo, and bring it back to Me'ena Megureshes, it's not considered a complete nesina. But v'im lav, if for whatever reason he can't do that anymore, then Megureshes. My time, no? I placed the get into her hand. Be'inon krisus, we need a final cutting, because it says sefer krisus. It's a sefer that separates, a complete separation. And since here, you haven't given it in a way where it's complete, Vileka, because he's still holding on a little bit to the get, it doesn't fulfill krisus. Amrav Yehuda, Haisa yada asui k'ktapris. Her hand was like an incline. The zarkula, and he threw it to her. Avol pishi get liada and Megureshes. She didn't have her hand like this, as a base kibul. She had her hand like this, so it could fall out. Eina Megureshes. Because her hand was not in a position where it could remain there. So the Gemara says, "Amai haki nafil barba amistidei konafil." It's Walter's question again. Even if it falls, it's going to be within her arba amas. So b'shalonach, the get rolled, and it didn't come to rest in her arba amas. It rolled out of the arba amas.
But that's mashma that if it would have stayed in the arba amos, it would have been good.
So the Gemara says v'tigorish ba'avira de arba amos. So it went through the airspace of the arba amos. So why shouldn't the divorce chal at that moment? And in fact, if you don't say that, then we're going to be able to resolve a very famous kasha, tipshot the by Rabbi Elazar. Arba ames sha'amru, when we say regarding damages or regarding a kinyan, that if something is within the arba ames of the person, it's within his reshus, yesh lahen avir, or ein lahen avir. Does it include the airspace? Even let's say it's rolling through. Well, as long as for some moment it was in the airspace, is that enough? Well, Tifshot from this Gemara, we would be able to answer by saying that she's not a Megureshes, that just being in the airspace as it moving through the airspace is not enough. Ein la'avir. So the Gemara says there, we can't use what we just learned to answer that fundamental question. Because Chachma Yaskinon, Be'emeres al-Gavanar, she was on a riverbank. Because if it would have fallen out of her hand, it would have immediately got lost and fallen into the river. So in that case, everybody would agree that her arba amos would not acquire it for her. But ein chanami, if she's not by a river, there would be a debate whether she would be a divorced woman, because maybe we'd say the arba amos. So let's see what the poskim say about that. If it came to rest, so we use the prayer because now It had reached her hand, but then fell. So there we use the Arba Amis principle, as Walter elucidated, that it's within her possession. We're talking about she's in the Rishus HaRabim.
Yeah, but let me ask you something. What I don't understand. I understand it's in Rishus HaRabim. But what happens if, what's the difference? In other words, what's the difference between, just it's a shaila, then I know you got to go at Shabbos there, I mean, you got to go to get ready. But what's the difference between, if the Chachamim gave you Rishut to have the Dalet Amos around you in the Rishus HaRabim as your Rishus for that time, right? When you walk in Dalet, we know that. So what's the difference between that and her Chatzer? In other words, her Chatzer is the same thing. It fell into her chatzer. It's her domain. That the Dalet Amos is actually her domain. So what's the difference if it fell into her hand or didn't fall into her hand in both cases? That's all the shaila is.
So the member over there by chatzer, so that din is learned from Yada. The chatzer is mamish like her yad.
But what's the difference if
it seems like when they extended an Arba Amos around a person in the Rishus HaRabim, it's not mamish considered yadol like her chotzer. The chotzer is given greater halachic validity than the Dalet Amos. You've demonstrated.
I don't know. In law, you can't.
Between those two cases.
But in law, you can't make such a. I know the Chachamim made, but it's either. If it's good for the goose, okay. Anyway, you should have a good Shabbos. If it's good for the goose,
giving somebody Dalet Amos in Rishus HaRabim is not the same as a person's Rishus HaYachid. It's chotzer. Nobody's going to argue that it's not hers.
Excuse me. If the Chachamim gave you that Rishus, why are they going to argue that it's not yours? It's a special chiddush. It's not. You can't argue that. Okay.
We see that it's not like her.
I understand the Chachamim. I know not like me, but it doesn't mean you can't make halacha lachatzai. You can't make halacha.
And if it rolled and came to rest after it hit her hand, because you fulfilled the nosan b'yadav fully, and then it stayed in her Dalet Amos, she's divorced. But v'im lo noch b'samuchla and elanis galgal michutz l'arba Amos. That shaila of something rolling through your Dalet Amos, it's a suffix whether it is koine you or not koine you. So she remains a suffix megureshes. Okay.
The question would be if somebody threw a get into your chatzer and it rolled out of the chatzer, are you divorced or not? You sold it to your house chatzer. And then it rolled out of your chatzer. I'd like to know what the halacha is there. Okay, you should have a good Shabbos.
When the wind blows it away, you throw it in, it's there. The wind blows it away.
So if it came to rest,
yes,
chatzer, there would be no shaila. If 10 minutes later the wind blew it away, she's a divorced woman.
She doesn't know
regarding the chatzer.
She doesn't know
it was there. She'll be, because remember, a woman is divorced, Bal Korcha. Not today. Today, because of Rabbeinu Gershom.
Yeah, Rabbeinu Gershom, you can't, today you can't say that.
No, you can't
say that. You can't, there's no Bal Korcha, especially, maybe by the Sephardim, they can do.
No, that's Rabbeinu Gershom.
By the Ashkenazim.
The Ashkenazim, we can't do it.
Have a good Shabbos, Walter. You're being political.
So, is Sunday morning good or is not? Walter, you can't learn Sunday morning?
Ernie, just do whatever. I had Mario send me the recordings from the other two that 12 o'clock is no good for me either, but if it's fine, if it's good for you, learn with whoever wants to learn with it, and I'll catch it up. Mario,
well, what's better? Is noontime better or 8 o'clock better?
No, 8 o'clock is better.
8 o'clock is better
for everybody.
Yeah, but if it's Sunday, we may not be back at 6. I'm going to have to do it at noontime because Sunday is a regular day here. We won't be back until 9 o'clock at night. So I'll have to learn at 10 o'clock at night, which is noontime Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can do that, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't think I'll be there, but whatever, we'll see.
I don't have any, let me see. I don't have any brera. We have to do it then. Can't do it Sunday morning.
Okay, whoever is there is there. If not, you'll
8 o'clock in the morning. We could do it 8 o'clock in the morning. The problem is we're having davening here. Yeah, no, that's too risky. Well, I'll have to do it at 10 o'clock. Whoever's there is there. It'll be taped, and that's how we'll have to do it.
Okay.
Why don't you? You can't do it at 10 o'clock at night. No.
10 o'clock at night.
No, our 10 o'clock at night would be.
But Motzei Shabbos 10 o'clock.
8 in the morning. But we have davening is at 7:30. We go on the buses already. There's breakfast. It's
okay. Enjoy yourself, Ernie.
Enjoy. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.